Hello, guys and gals. Hello, and welcome back to the Exploring Consciousness-Based Applications for Climate Action workshop. My name is Ramses de Leon, and I will be your host for this session. We have with us Dr. Julia Mossbridge, who will talk about using Psy to stimulate scientific collaboration and creativity, describing her 2019 to 2020 studies involving climate scientists and remote viewers attempting to brainstorm and receive non-local information about responsible responses to climate change. Dr. Mossbridge is an affiliate professor at the University of San Diego and co-founder of the Institute of Love and Time, focusing on an interdisciplinary exploration of the physics and psychology of travel in time and how these relate to the mechanics of unconditional love and hope. Her interests include the intersection of spirituality and science, time in psychology and physics, advanced topics in human exceptional experiences, and models of transformation and change. So, without further ado, the stage is yours, Dr. Mossbridge.
Without further ado, I will take the stage. Thank you so much, Ramses. And as I'm giving this talk, I will probably need to slide around as the son likes to play little games with me, which is kind of fun. I'd like to say, if you want this bigger on your screen, press the full screen button. On the top, you'll see a banner. That's not going to go away. I'm not using PowerPoint. I'm using a different kind of technology where I don't handle screen sharing as well. So you'll just get used to that top banner there, I hope. Thanks so much, Ramses, and thanks, Annalisa, for this conference. I'm going to go ahead and begin, and then we'll have some questions later. So I've come from a world in which I have been convinced myself scientifically that the way time works is something like this. All the events that have occurred, are occurring, and will occur sort of exist in a landscape. And human consciousness or human attention rolls across that landscape, kind of like this bar is rolling across this time landscape. So we have landing on the moon, we have 9/11, we have COVID, we have, of course, the always promised flying car cities. That's my representation of the future here. So if this is true, if this were actually accurate, and I think there's some decent evidence to suggest that at least some portion of this idea is accurate, then we should be able to spy on the future. We should be able to get information about the future and actually think about different timelines or different versions of this future flying car city that we might want to live in, and how we can move towards positive things and avoid negative outcomes. And we could use, hopefully, in this worldview, we could use precognition, which I sometimes will call precog or presentiment. So let me define that for you. Precognition is perception, behavior, or cognition that reliably predicts future events that are not otherwise predictable by any of these three things. 1, direct cause. 2, conscious inference. Or 3, unconscious inference. Let me just break that down. So, direct cause. It's not precognition when you know that you love turkey sandwiches and you have a dream about turkey sandwich for lunch, and then you make yourself a turkey sandwich. And the reason it's not precognition is because you can cause that event to happen. So in other words, it may be that you just decided to have a turkey sandwich because of your dream, not because you were getting information from the future. 2, conscious inference. If you know that on Friday you get your paycheck, and that morning you think, I'm going to get my paycheck today, and then you get your paycheck. Also, you consciously inferred that from your awareness that on Fridays you get your paycheck, not precognition. And 3, unconscious inference. Unconscious inference is you're not aware that you know something, but you do know that thing. This is a little harder for people to differentiate. So, for instance, I get a lot of emails from people who say things like, I just had a feeling that my friend would call, and my friend called at that very moment, and I haven't talked to my friend in a while. And what they don't know, I mean, I'm not saying that any particular person has this, but in general, what people don't know is whether that friend has a schedule that they call on that they're unconscious of. It took me a while to learn that my mother liked to call on Sunday mornings. So when I first started getting the feeling that she was going to call, I thought, ooh, precognition. And then I thought, nope, that's unconscious inference. The information was consistent. It was predictable from the past. I'm not drawing it from the future. So in precognition, really, it's about getting the information from the future because it's the only place where that information could come from. And precognition has been scientifically validated, especially in a protocol called, in multiple protocols, but in one called remote viewing. So what is remote viewing, or RV? It's retrieving information about an event, person, or situation that is unknown to the viewer. So a tasker in this protocol might sit down with the viewer and say, please describe target 91482380. Okay, that's all the viewer knows about the target, is that number. And then the viewer starts reporting their impressions. They go through a protocol or a method or technology, depending on how you want to think about it, to report their impressions. So there's a forested area with a body of water running underground. Maybe that's what they say. So what's precognitive remote viewing, or precog RV? It's remote viewing of a future potential, suspected, or actual event, person, or situation. So again, the tasker might ask, with the same number there, please describe target 91482380, but now do it 2 weeks from now. What's going on at that target, whatever it is, 2 weeks from now? And the viewer comes up with, well, there's this fluid seeping up through a concrete-like substance. So they're essentially traveling in time to describe the answer to the question, but they don't know what the question is, and sometimes they don't even know what that question is in the future, and sometimes they are told the question in the future, but at no point do they know the question or the answer in the present. So the CIA used this methodology, precognitive remote viewing, for a while, largely between the years 1972 and 1980, mid-1980s. So here's a declassified document of one of those sessions. And this is just the descriptive portion. Prior to the session, the viewer was shown the attached picture and told his target would be the ship, blah, 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 censored. He was told that he would be looking at a time window which he had previously examined. During the session, the viewer was asked to focus on the time period 6 days into the future, 17th to the 18th of December 1980. He was asked to locate and describe the activity on board the target ship. During the session, the viewer was asked to elaborate on portions of his perceptions by the interviewer as directed by the control monitor. So there's multiple people here. There's the interviewer, there's someone in another room making sure that they're getting good information, the control monitor. Interestingly, this is a part of a series, or I think that this is part of the series that had to do with drug trafficking, trying to stop drug trafficking, and I think it was largely fairly successful. I don't know about this particular session, but this is just an example. So the interviewer says this will be a remote viewing session for 1400 hours, 12 December 1980. Relax and concentrate, focus your attention on the ship, blah, blah, blah. The ship you know well, focus solely and completely on the blah. Move now your awareness, your perspective, that part of you which can see and describe all things. Move now to the time period 6 days from now, the 17th through the 18th of December. And so they're basically guiding the person in a meditative state to see what they see, to feel what they feel, to report what they smell, touch, hear, taste, 6 days from now in relationship to that target. And so this person comes up with, well, I don't have any land in sight. Closest land is off the port side, 75 kilometers, 80 kilometers away, be off the port side to the front, maybe 40 degrees from the center axis of the ship. The land would be flat, very low, barren wasteland and flat. And the interviewer says, okay, try to stay focused on the ship, etc., focus on the time. So they're just trying to focus them on the task. And so this would go on, and they'd come up with some interesting information. This kind of thing was also used in around 1979 with the Iranian hostage situation. Here's a part of a letter from the Joint Chiefs of Staff to a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Air Force about the Grill Flame project, which was one name for this project during the time. Application of Project Grill Flame to the Iranian hostage situation was actively initiated by DA during mid-November 1979. Sufficient correlation of physical verifiables has been obtained to indicate that Grill Flame data appears to provide insights that would not be readily available through other sources, particularly when working against a target in a denied or hostile environment. In other words, remote viewing is very useful when you actually have an environment that's denied to you. You don't have other kinds of access. I put in bold the bottom part. In summary, Grill Flame appears to have potential value when used as a supplemental or keying source. In other words, indicating that there might be a problem that needs to be looked into more deeply. Any decisions based solely on Grill Flame material, however, would be extremely risky and not recommended. In other words, You should always get multiple types of intelligence and work together to try to figure out how to solve problems, rather than trusting any particular type of intelligence. I bolded that because that's very important for us to remember as we go through this psi and consciousness workshop. As a result of a bunch of these types of protocols that became not just scientific experiments, but became operational within the intelligence community and were declassified in 1995, Jessica Utts was asked by Congress, she's a statistician, she was asked by Congress in the mid-90s to look at the data and make a recommendation about what she saw. And she said precognition, in which the answer is known to no one until a future time, appears to work quite well. So in 1995, she said this, and then gave her own study in 1996 as well in an independent journal from the CIA/Congress study. She became the American Statistical Association president in 2016. She's been a collaborator of mine. She's quite good, and she still to this day believes precognition is one of the few, well, not one of the few, but one of the strongest supported psi technologies that there is. And since then, maybe 30 or more studies have come out showing, again, scientifically, that precognition is actually happening, and it's a human skill that we can use. So it's been used a lot in missing persons cases, and I've used it in some missing persons cases, but I've also used it to work with FBI/NCIS anti-terrorism group for financial stock prediction. And in parentheses, you could see what I've worked with someone else as well in that area. Scientific experiment planning, technology development, personal growth, my own in particular, and that of my students, climate change mitigation. And that is the piece that I want to talk about here, that last one. I worked with John Vivanco on this, and actually several anonymous folks as well, who are really important. So I'll explain the overall design. The overall design was, 1, do remote viewing sessions. So breaking this down in a really simple way. But basically, get some skilled remote viewers who you know can work precognitively, and have them do remote viewing sessions with the intention of answering questions in the future. 2, work with atmospheric scientists. That's who we had, we found 2 atmospheric scientists who were willing to do this work anonymously with us. We worked with them, John Vivanco and I, to write specific objectives and questions, including what we call a calibration objective. And I'll say a little bit more on that later, but it's basically an objective to determine, is our process working? Are we getting good answers for a question that we already know the answer to? How are these viewers doing on a question that we already know the answer to? Because all the other questions are going to be climate science and climate mitigation questions that we don't have the answers to, and we want to make sure we can trust our viewers. 3, interpret the remote viewing sessions in light of these questions. So these are the sessions that people did before the questions were written. And 4, share the results with the climate scientists and see what they have to say and what their response is to the answers of the intuitives or the remote viewers. So let's go to that calibration objective. I'm only going to really go over 2 objectives, and I'll explain why in a second, because there's 10 of them, first of all, and I can't go over all of them, and it's a lot of text. But I'll also tell you at the end where you can read the scientific explanation of all of this and the more lay audience stuff. So our calibration objective was describe the temperature change of the tropopause as the tropical cloud top height increases. Okay, this was written by the climate scientists, John and I, who were the project leaders, and the leaders of the remote viewing team. We did not know the correct answer to this, and we agreed not to try to look it up because we knew we would get confused if we did. And this question was asked after we did the remote viewing sessions, just to be clear. And no one knew, right, which session would be matched with this question. So that is the situation of the calibration objective. Our initial, John and I, our project leader interpretation, without talking to the climate scientists, our interpretation of the data was, overall impression is of a process like a cooling system. One side is cold, the other is hot. There is an impression of increases in air pressure with chemicals like benzene evaporating and increasing the cloud height. According to our interpretation of the intuitive's raw data, this heats things up but cools down other locations. There is a sense of a temperature inversion caused by this uplifting of water, air, and chemicals. So that's what we got from the intuitive's data. Remember, they did not see the question, so we're just drawing that from their data. This is after discussing with the climate scientists, we came out with this statement. Increasing convective cloud top height cools the tropopause region, increasing the temperature inversion gradient that naturally occurs here. However, the global effect on climate is warming because the net long wave cloud forcing increases with height. Local temperature gradients depend on the strength and height of intense convective clouds. It is possible that intuitives were seeing this dynamic, although evaporation of benzene would not be expected to increase the cloud top height. The atmospheric scientists felt that trace gas transport across the tropopause is worth examining, because chemicals crossing into the stratosphere, including water, can be radiatively active or can destroy ozone. So this act, the first, so two things. The calibration objective was the only objective where viewers were talking about temperature at all. And apparently they went into depth and really focused on the tropopause because most of the temperature focus was cooling, although they talked about this inversion, or they alluded to it. This other piece is that the calibration objective itself, although we did not mean it to, actually started the more creativity running in the atmospheric scientists, who were already very creative because they're willing to work with a bunch of remote viewers and us on this project. But in any case, they started thinking about, wait a minute, although benzene evaporation probably wouldn't do that, what about trace gas transport across the tropopause, right? So it's already working, so we were excited. So we like to write, in the paper you'll see we like to write highlights, which is sort of our observation of the process. So this was the calibration objective, and the intuitive response could be interpreted as local heating and environmental cooling, the opposite of the correct answer and potentially therefore void. However, the fact that multiple sessions from different intuitives address temperature dynamics and inversions, not common topics among their transcripts, suggests they were getting some good information relevant to the objective, and project leads were interpreting their transcripts reasonably well. In a side note, multiple intuitives describe anthropogenic chemicals related to this objective. So it's like very precise. I noticed that the wording described the temperature change of the tropopause. And the climate scientists are pointing out that the convective cloud top height cools the tropopause. So it's possible, we kind of didn't realize how precise the viewers were going to be. We were focusing their attention on the tropopause, what the climate scientists were trying to do, but we realized we didn't do precisely enough is get the global change, which would have been warming, rather than focusing on the tropopause. But there it is, right in the wording. So that's a lesson learned, which we actually carried into our next project. Okay, so here's another objective. We had several mitigation objectives. This is my favorite objective because it's very open-ended. It says basically what works, assuming we solve climate change in the future. Describe the most crucial piece of information or technology needed to do so we can potentially take action in this direction. We had several other mitigation objectives. About half of them were mitigation objectives, focusing on different types of mitigation. And all the other ones were horribly negative, like people dying and unexpected crop damage and, flooding that was everything that was unexpected because of these feedback loops that we're not aware of. And before this was started, I was not against mitigation at all. But when I started looking at the data coming in from the viewers for these different mitigation attempts, I was like, well, okay, I understand now. So this one is the most positive one because it leaves it open for the viewers to describe the thing that works. So the initial interpretation before talking to the climate scientists, the atmospheric scientists. It appears that the transcripts describe two changes. One, in the future, a critical number of climate scientists will agree that the best approach is to develop a biological solution to address climate change. And two, the use of potentially bioluminescent diatoms and or dinoflagellates embedded in some kind of flat but flexible gel-like substrate to create an energy source. So that came out of nowhere. We found it. I'm going to go into detail where we found that in the data, but that's what came out, both of those things, that a critical number of climate scientists are going to agree that the best approach is to collaborate with an existing entity, biological entity that already lives in the feedback system rather than something that's non-biological, like a chemical or something that we spray. So what's the final discussion after talking with the atmospheric scientists? It makes sense that biological feedback will be important for regulating the future climate, especially atmospheric-oceanic interactions. Diatoms and dinoflagellates live in oceans, and these are a reasonable possibility for climate mitigation. While methane could be produced by these organisms, it will need to be harnessed for them to be a useful energy source. And then the highlights. One of the atmospheric scientists mentioned that if diatoms secrete dimethyl sulfide, or DMS, this could brighten marine clouds, reflecting more sunlight and cooling the ocean, an idea originally presented by Charleston, Lovelock, and Andre in 1987. Later, the idea of a natural thermostat was found to be more complex than originally thought, although cloud particles do form more efficiently with DMS as a cloud condensation nucleus. Okay, now I want to go over some of the data that brought this idea of diatoms to our mind, John and I, when we were analyzing the transcripts. You'll note these are from different viewers. Each of the viewers has a different style. And I've put in typed text their handwriting because sometimes it's hard to read. But you can see here someone just draws something like this that just looks like a biological with some kind of opening here, which seemed to match this type of diatom or dinoflagellate. I don't know which. Let's call them all the same thing for now. This person says there's these little subjects, they're purple color, they're data collecting, they're mining, and they're like a popsicle shape. And this one matched this diatom. This one says illuminated, moving, hollow center, illuminated, moving. So there's a lot of bioluminescent diatoms and dinoflagellates. Splashes of purple, organic with color, reminds me of a cell. Web of contacts, like a cell. Structure is more complex. Emergent form, beehive, complexity. Patterns of light, energy. Deductions, fractal, snowflake, crystalline, biofield. In other words, biological. Blue, yellow, green. Native indigenous people, painted faces, water creatures, yellow sun. Sometimes native indigenous people will paint their faces with bioluminescent materials, like diatoms and dinoflagellates from the ocean. So this is where we got when we combined all this. None of this stuff was in any other question. So we thought, all right, there's something going on there. Where do we get this membrane, this gel-like membrane, from these kind of statements? Someone says, like a film, there's a thin layer life form. The word was silica, which, by the way, the many diatoms, I think they're mostly made of silica, or at least their skeletons are. Transparent, gel-like blue. This has like this another like sheet-like thing that says, winds that move me aren't my own. I'll be whatever you want me to be. This one, box or cage growing upward, pendulum, south-facing slope, natural materials, clean, balanced, thick, clearing out, reuse, repurpose. Balls moving through tubes, past them, highly energetic feeling here, and in the subject, quick, it happens fast. Electric, energetic, blue, thin, frail, subtle, not in your face, floating, scattered, deduction, membrane, thin, transparent, frail, subtle, fine, invisible, as if in life in some sort of medium, redness of the life. So it feels like that it's like in this medium, it's captured in a medium, but in a collaborative, some kind of way. Collect your shells, we're leaving the beach, I'm tailor-made. This is also speaking to this medium. This looks like a house with some kind of ocean downstream and maybe a solar panel. It's hard to see there. Rainbow colors, very bright colors, tubes of light, clear tubes with colors moving through them. Green is important. It's like a laboratory experiment or some kind of invention. I see these clear containers with colors inside, very large containers, mountains and rivers. Tiny voices, helpless, liquid gel dots like starburst image, word, life form, word, ancient, simple, subtle, small, simple, curious, anxious. So we wouldn't want the diatoms to be anxious. So that's really interesting and important to think about. Flash with energy, transparent, white electricity, deduction, parasite, worm, bioluminescent, physical response, queasy. What makes it amazing? So vast, it's huge. I feel microscopic even though I'm my usual size. I'm getting sparkly streams of sparkling light flickering, coming down, close to one that's incomplete. There's activity going on there. It's a helping thing. It generates white light. Those things are conscious. I'm correcting myself. There is some intelligence to them. They may be vehicles, but they are entangled with, wait, okay, so what's happening? Is there some being connected to this frame? And this is a piece I think my last slide on this series is about how it's, how there's some kind of an electrical, like energy production piece of this. So again, these are different viewers. So how to activate sparkles, bubbling, visual of a metal object large has two rounded ends. Pass them quick, balls being thrown by subjects through tubes like a rainbow, red, green, yellow, blue. Words are go, go, go. Splat, highway, allowance, bespoken, arranged, electrical. Bet your bottom dollar. Requested. Spinning, vortex expanding. Feels like something weighted on both ends. Tubular, metallic, solid, spherical, rotating direction, blue light, subtle humming. Tumbler, turbulent, quickie, electromagnet. So that's the variety of the kind of things that when you have a question to interpret this stuff in, it's almost, you could consider it useful psychic information, which I do, but we didn't have a proof-oriented method. We were trying to stimulate creativity, and all of that stimulated a lot of creativity in the atmospheric scientists and the team. So what we learned was it's really great to partner with open-minded, rigorous scientists who are working in a very different field. It's fantastic. Collaborating on the objective or the question you're asking is a great idea, especially with people who are familiar with the field. But also being precise in the wording really matters. The viewers who are really good respond precisely to the wording and the intention of the question. Whoops, I have a typo here. Trust that viewers, seers, intuitives do well on technical problems when blind. So actually trust the system. In fact, we took that learning from this and we did a second set of studies where we were much more precise about our questions because we realized the intuitives could actually answer, like which satellite would be better for looking at X, Y, and Z technical thing that John and I didn't understand, but the atmospheric scientists did, and it turns out the viewers did too. Allow each viewer to work in their unique way. That's key. Not requiring any particular methodology, but just letting them work in their unique way and having the onus be on the analysis, having the onus be on the project leaders, the taskers to try to figure it out, and also the scientists we collaborated with in atmospheric science to try to figure it out and find out how it could be useful. And focusing on idea generation, problem solving, not proof orientation. So we could care less if people thought this was psychic information. We wanted to generate ideas and problem solve. But what we ended up with was two big take-home messages. If you decided that this was useful psychic information, what you would have learned was, one, climate mitigation efforts that don't collaborate with biological entities don't work and may be very bad, even though they appear to be good when we look at some small part of the model of the world. And the reason for that is we don't understand a lot of the model of the world. So that we think we understand some of it, and we for sure know that we don't understand other parts. And those parts we don't understand, it looks like from these data, end up being a problem. And two, that collaborating with biological entities can happen and could actually solve two problems, carbon sequestration, but also energy creation. So to find out more, you can read the paper, Mossbridge and Vivanco 2021. There are multiple versions of it. There's going to be a remote viewing focused version that'll be coming out in Aperture, the remote viewing magazine put out by the International Remote Viewing Association. That'll come out in 2022. There's a scientific version on ResearchGate at https://climate science. And there's a popular version on Medium that I wrote at tinyurl climate science Medium. And the sponsoring organization is TILT, the Institute for Love and Time. We're going through our funding drive now. If you want to visit TILT and make a donation, that's wonderful, but make sure you make a donation to Public Parapsychology, which reminds me, I want to thank Annalisa and Public Parapsychology for this great idea for a conference. I hope there are more. I know there will be. And my sponsoring institutions, University of San Diego, California Institute of Integral Study, Institute for Love and Time, and Institute of Noetic Sciences. Also want to thank Jeff and Leslie Olsner for their support for this project and projects that I didn't even describe here, and the Bial Foundation for support for related projects. Also, Mark Bacuzzi and the Woodbridge Institute, great collaborators of with TILT and also with me. And also John Vivanco and Right Hemispheric, without whom this project would never exist. John Vivanco gave me the psychological freedom to think that remote viewing could be used in this way. Thank you. All right. Hi. Thanks for all the love. I'm sending you love back.
There we go. So, Dr. Mossbridge, that was a very beautiful, very insightful presentation. It's a wonderful work that you have done and the plans that you have for the future. This is very insightful. I'm really looking forward to it. So I want to remind the attendees that you can put their questions in the chat. I think that people were so drawn into your presentation that haven't had time to put those there. That gives me at least the opportunity to post one on myself. So with all these with this particular research questions that you were asking, what would you say is the most valuable insight that you got from this line of research or for this particular research?
Ooh, I'm gonna have to. I'm gonna change the question to the two most valuable insights.
Okay, let's go with that.
Because they're competing for my mind, and I'll just have to say them both. So one is that that we have within us the capacity to solve these problems if we can come from a state of humility, and in fact, if we can not be biased by what we think we know. So what I love about this kind of precognitive remote viewing is this, I don't know if you've ever read Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow, but he talks
And I have
about
the opportunity.
yeah. So he talks about system 1 and system 2. And so system 1 is this intuitive, emotional, very fast, but he kind of denigrates it for being emotional and biased. And then system 2 is our analytical system that does a lot of rationalizing, and we sort of create a culture in which there's system 2 overreach. We believe that system 2 is the right one and system 1 is not. Psi, of course, lives in system 1.
Of course.
And what I love about this kind of work, especially precognitive remote viewing, is it starves system 2. You have nothing to go on. You're given a number, 92631147. Go. And for an hour, you write your impressions. Your system 2 starved. And it develops your system 1. It develops your capacity to bring this intuition in. And we have within us that capacity that actually knows so much more than we think we know. But it has coming from this state of humility because you don't know the question. So you always have to be in a state of discovery. You always have to be in a state of, I don't know, but maybe this, or I don't know, I'm perceiving this, right? And the same thing with the analysis. When John and I would analyze these data, we first analyzed them separately, and then we analyzed them together. And we said our impressions to each other and talked about what we thought. For the most part, we agreed. But the process of looking at each of these, and really, there were between 5 and 7 different viewers on most of these questions. And looking at each of them and seeing the pieces that came up and resonated across the viewers, like the ones I showed you, it's very humbling because it's like, look, this is a demonstration of like a holographic universe. I mean, it's just a demonstration of that is powerful. So that's one. So sorry, that was a long answer. One insight. And the other insight is that we have to be very careful when we do remote viewing or when we do all this kind of psi work, even if it's receptive work, even if we say we're not doing any active or, like psychokinetic type of psi because we're afraid of all the effects. Even when you do receptive psi, you may be influencing things. Some of the trickier pieces that came through in some of the sessions suggested that there were like multiple timelines. And by looking at a particular timeline that was catastrophic, it seemed like the message was like, don't even look at that because that can cause the catastrophe to happen. Like, don't even go down there. So that's why I presented just the positive one, because like, let's put our energy into like, hey, someone wrote in the chat, like, let's make houses with walls out of diatoms, right? Like that's the direction we want to go. We want to go in and we want to make sure that that's a good direction and the diatoms feel good about it, right? So we want to do some deep spiritual collaboration with the people who share this, I'm so people focused, with the entities that share this earth with us, right? And that's a positive kind of timeline to sort of pursue and look at. And so looking at that further might be really valuable to further elaborate on what those systems are.
I agree with you. I think the correct way to go was to present those two insights and not just one. Thanks for that complete question. So let's see. I don't want to take all the time here, but I would like to. So Josh is asking, so he loved this experiment. So have you found any biologists to work with on the next steps in bringing these solutions to the world? What are the next steps for this?
I would like to work with some. I mean, I think it would be ideally ideally, I'd like to work with, 2 or 3, kind of like we did here, 2 atmospheric scientists, 2 biologists who know something about diatoms, and say, like, let's start thinking of some good questions about how this would work. Like, let's pursue this. I mean, if there's some kind of technology where we can collaborate with diatoms, but I would kind of like one of those scientists, or maybe replace one of those scientists with an indigenous healer or someone who knows how to communicate with diatoms, so that we could actually have the questions coming from a place, not just technically, how do we use diatoms to help this problem, but instead, how do we really work with diatoms, so that it would be pretty nice to have both of those components, and then have maybe 10 or so questions that could really help, the answers could really help us design, basically pulling forward this technology, which is a technique I now use in my studies. I pull forward from the future the technology, because it's a good place to get it.
I mean, if it exists there, you can begin to build it. That's a very interesting approach. Many would agree with you. So I think we're running out of time, but I think we can get these 2 questions. So this one is a quick one from Michael Dahl. So who approached you? You to the climate scientists, or the other way around in this particular?
Oh, we approached the climate. Yeah, I was very clear I wanted to do this study, and we went searching for climate scientists, who would not balk at it. And we sort of had a secret inroad that the donor for the study knew some climate scientists. Or, I'm sorry, I keep saying climate scientists, but really they were atmospheric scientists but obviously, if you study the atmosphere, you're going to be studying climate impact, to some extent. And so he knew one of them, and then that one knew another one, saying maybe she would be open. So we found a couple that way, and it was great. And one of them actually decided that they wanted to learn how to do remote viewing after this, and was trained in remote viewing. So that was pretty cool too.
Awesome. That's a great way to approach it. So let's see. Let's put this last question on stage. So Jean is asking us, what you may know now about the future of atmospheric correction could be due to a half-hearted and ineffectual effort by scientists and governments. Other remedies could perform better, but may not be implemented in the future, so the remote viewers couldn't see them. I mean, you also talked about different timelines, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so a big important question in the world of precognitive remote viewing, like perhaps the number one unanswered question that is sort of answered, maybe, but not scientifically, is, are viewers seeing, is there only one future? Are viewers seeing, there's a multiple part question, is there only one future? Are viewers seeing that future? Even if there is only one future, are viewers seeing probabilities related to that future before the actual future arises, or before the event arises? If there are multiple futures, are viewers seeing the most probable future, or are they seeing the future that they are biased towards, or that the past has biased all of us towards? So the most likely future. So these are like obviously key questions are not answered, and it's frustrating. And the amazing thing is, in terms of application, you can still use this technique to give you useful information, because if you go down the list of all the different questions that are unanswered about that, what it all points to is, what you want to do is find the most positive vision, and you work towards that. So regardless of whether they're looking towards an actual future, in which case, great, that means there's a positive thing in the actual future to work towards, or it's a probabilistic one, then great, that means there's a possibility that can happen. Either way, the action we take is to work towards the most positive. So in terms of what the half-hearted attempts, etc., maybe, but I don't care, because they're not the most positive. That wasn't the most positive. You see, I mean, if one of those could have been positive in some way, we actually ranked them in our paper according to like the least to most dangerous, according to the viewers. So there was one that was like the least dangerous, but still looked bad. I guess what I'm saying is, if you journey down those roads too much and push on this thing you think should work, but it doesn't feel right, and it doesn't feel right to the viewers who don't even know the question, and it doesn't feel right sort of on a spiritual level, then you can stop doing that. Like you don't have to do that. You can just move to something else.
I think those are the type of insights that we need to really integrate into remote viewing or precognition research, not just the cold data processing. But thanks a lot for that insightful answer. And I mean for all of them, and the very great presentation. I think it was a very wonderful one. So we will
Thank you.
close this session now, and we'll have just a few minutes before the next presentation. So thank you, Dr. Julia Mossbridge, and for the attendees, please make use of the social lounge. And thank you all for coming by, and to our speaker, Dr. Julia Mossbridge, for this wonderful presentation.